as I started rewatching on Netflix later.
Hold on. Yeah. Hey guys, dogs, come here.
Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. I'm Jeff, and as always, I'm joined by my good pals Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael, they're always at odds with each other, adversaries to the very, very last breath of their life. They'll always be clawing tooth and nail to argue about the top 4 things of any certain topic. And this week, the topic we've chosen is fictional elections. And I'd say we chose it, but we didn't choose it. We got it contributed from Jennifer Skornik, who is on Twitter at jenniferskornik.com. That's not .com. That's spelled how you imagine it is, with 7 Ks and 3 schwas and 2 umlauts. And Jennifer has probably kept in mind the thing that's probably chief on a lot of people's minds right now, and that is the election. When this comes out, will the election have happened? It
will be a scant 4 days away.
4 days away. So thank you, Jennifer. And Jennifer, we're happy that you contributed this, and listeners out there or followers on the Facebook or anything can always contribute some suggestions for topics. We'd love to hear.
The best thing about that was that Jeff, it's like in the last debates, they ask a question and then they give their canned answer. I like that, Jeff, you had a canned answer that had to be given. You had to hit all of your points on getting out our social media.
Yeah.
You had to get us out there first, and now we can finally answer.
Wrong.
That's our moderator, Richard Manfredi.
Wrong.
I never said that. I didn't say that. I just heard you say it. No, I didn't say that.
I'm so excited for this election to be done.
Over.
Oh, yeah.
Well, democracy might be over in a few days. Well, there's that.
We'll find out.
That's true. Okay, so since Jennifer picked it, neither of you gentlemen picked it, so I am going to go with who is the tallest person, and that is Richard Manfredi.
Wrong.
Okay, Michael Winfield, you're the taller person.
Okay.
You're the bigger man.
More handsome man.
That's right. My first choice is...
You said, that's right, I am.
Well,
that's right.
Listen,
Richard.
we're honest here.
I'm very attracted to Richard. No.
Got weird, guys.
Got weird.
Got really strange. My first choice is the 1996 election between Bill Clinton and Bob Dole as alien replicants, Kang and Kodos, from The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, number 7. The Simpsons have actually done a ton of election episodes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I had one that almost made my list that wasn't this. It was the Mayor Quimby versus Sideshow
Bob Roberts.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've done about like 9 or 10 different episodes. You know, it's a well that they can dig deep into pretty easily. But this one, it was very much of the time. It was based on the 96 election, and they had versions of Bob Dole and Bill Clinton who were having some sort of debate, and then they were kidnapped by the 2 resident aliens that fly around. I don't know. Are they Martians? Are they? Who knows?
I'm sure that some Simpsons nerd knows what planet they're from.
what planet they're from, and they're abducted and replaced by a cloned body of themselves. They cram themselves into cloned bodies, and then they go about doing things in their own weird alien way. And what's great is that the country's trying to pay attention to them, but they're just saying asinine things. So the Bob Dole character at some point starts saying he says abortions for all, and people start booing, and then he says abortions for none, and then people start cheering.
Booing, yeah.
And tiny American flags for all, and people start cheering. But it's it basically comes down to the end of it where they kind of reveal that they are aliens. And, one of the aliens prophetically says, it's a 2-party system. You have to vote for one of us. And, of course, one of them, Kang gets elected.
Yeah.
Well, the best part of that, actually, you're leaving that, is when they say, they bring that up, and Kodos or Kang goes, "What are you going to do? Vote for a third party?" And then you cut to Ross Perot angrily, smashing his little old-time, election-type hat.
I chose this, I think, just because this rhetoric seems to come up every year, at least in our elections. The 2-party system, you got to vote for one of them, the lesser of 2 evils. You can't throw your vote away on a Ross Perot, or this year it's a Gary Johnson, honestly, it's Donald Trump if you're voting for him. But I do like that they were able to tap into that at the time, and it's kind of prevalent now. And also funny. This was it was peak Simpsons.
Yeah.
7 years in, it was like riding the crest of when the writers were at their best, and
It's right in the pocket, right in the sweet spot.
yeah.
Let's keep in mind Homer actually had a chance to save Bob Dole and Al Gore and accidentally shot them into space.
What's your first
the
one,
best.
Richard?
My first election is from the movie Election from 1999, the high school student body election between Tracy Flick and whatever the hell the character that Chris Klein played was.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of just like a cipher in this whole thing. Just
Right.
a big dumb slab of meat.
The generic high school American.
Yeah,
kid.
just a big old like piece of Play-Doh. So if you haven't seen the movie, I would highly recommend it. It is Alexander Payne's second movie, his first studio movie that he did. It was a moderate hit at the box office, but is kind of
Kind of had some cult status.
yeah, definitely
right?
has
Yeah.
a cult status as one of the best comedies, kind of the late '90s.
Brought me back into the Team Broderick. I really thought he did such a great performance in that.
Oh, sure, and he hadn't
Yeah.
done a lot before that for the last
No,
few
and he'd
years.
done some weird things like well,
he was in Mars
Marlon
Attacks.
Brando. Yeah, that
Oh, you talking about the Freshman?
the freshman.
I
yeah.
loved the Freshman. I
Oh my
loved it.
God.
For whatever reason, I think just because Brando just played peak, like he just played a character.
Yeah. Characterization of Don Corleone.
of himself.
Yeah.
But I really liked that one. I don't know. I thought it was kind of
Yeah.
sweet at the end, but maybe it was one of his weirder movies.
Matthew Broderick plays a history teacher living in Omaha, Nebraska, because all Alexander Payne movies must
Yeah,
be set in
in
Omaha,
Omaha.
Nebraska. And he's also oversees the student body elections. And there is a student played by Reese Witherspoon, Tracy Flick, who is overachieving, kind of full of herself a little bit about it, and just sort of annoyingly knows everything about everything. Is basically what everyone thinks about Hillary Clinton. Kind of a little
Yeah.
ruthless, but also kind of like the know-it-all, and kind of doesn't care about people as long as they do what she says. And
She's
you know,
she's built to be president.
basically, yeah. And the year before, she had an affair with Matthew Broderick's Jim McAllister's best friend teacher, and wound up getting the best friend kicked out of school, and somehow Jim McAllister kind of blames her for it a little bit, which is this weird kind of sexual politics thing.
Yeah.
So she decides to run for student body president, and no one decides to go against her because everyone assumes it's just a sure thing. So he gets, Jim McAllister, the teacher, gets kind of pissed off about this and decides to prop up Paul Metzler. That's his name. It's Chris Klein, who's basically just the big dumb football player, to go ahead and run, even though he has no interest in running. He doesn't care.
Right.
He's just sort of like, great, okay, sounds fun. And that's basically his speech at the big, here's how you speak, the big old assembly they always
Yeah.
have is, hey, you want to vote for somebody who wins, and I always win. Which, does that sound familiar? And she winds up getting mad and tearing down all of his posters and trying to dispose of them, and the teacher finds out, and then he decides to rig the election on the behalf of the jock to make
Yeah.
sure she doesn't win, because he's got this idea in his head, like, this is the type of person who always gets everything she wants. I'm going to stop her. And I guess the counterpoint I think she makes at one point is, look, you're just mad because you're stuck here in Omaha, Nebraska, and all these kids come through and they go on to better things, and they go on to, go to big cities and go have exciting lives.
Yeah.
And you're just stuck here and you're mad about that.
I think it's interesting that elections are a time when we're choosing a leader, but we're also choosing our proxy. And we want to choose somebody who not always just does the best job, but who mirrors us in the most flattering way that we can imagine.
Right.
And Chris Klein in that is definitely this very charismatic, very kind of simplistic, but all-American winner. Goob.
Yeah.
So I could see how even within the context of Omaha, he's this person that everybody would want to be versus this girl who seems to
it's
just
amazing
try too hard.
how much a percentage of the electorate always wants to elect the person that they'd like to have a beer with.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that comes up so often. It's like, you're not electing your best friend.
No, yeah, yeah.
This person is never going to meet you one-on-one unless you happen to do something
Yeah.
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
You have to like reach this new level that you've never achieved before, whether
Yeah.
you're an athlete that we've talked
Right.
about, or
Yeah.
like a a scientist or someone that actually goes out to make change. Otherwise, they're not having a beer with you unless you live in Ohio or Iowa and for a few weeks.
We would all want to elect John F. Kennedy over Richard Nixon, who was a better candidate at that point, who was probably more knowledgeable about foreign policy and international politics and things like that. But you don't want to hang out with Richard Nixon at a bar. He's sweaty. He probably creeps out the girls when he talks to them.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Come here and I'll buy you a shot. How about that?
What's your second one, Michael?
My second one is, speaking of Richard Nixon, it kind of delves into the more underhanded side of elections. And this is the 1801 Dunny on the Wold by-election in the episode Dish and Dishonesty in the third series of the British TV series Blackadder.
Oh.
And if you're unfamiliar with Blackadder, it was a series an English TV series that only lasted 4 seasons, like most British TV series do. They kind of know when to call it quits.
Right.
But it's the story of like Edmund Blackadder, and through each series, it kind of travels through time. It first starts out in the Middle Ages, and he's a prince. And the second series picks up, and he's I think he's like just a duke or something. He's
progressively goes down with every series.
It's funny because like he starts out kind of an idiot and stupid, and so he progressively gets like more and more cunning and evil, and like turns into a jerk.
I have not seen any Blackadder.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta tell you this. It's got Mr. Bean. It's got House.
Yeah. Hugh Laurie.
Yeah.
So by the third series, he's the butler to the Prince Regent, actually played by Hugh Laurie, he is an idiot. He's maniacally stupid and just dumb. Blackadder's his butler, and something ends up happening where Pitt the Younger, who's played by a teenager, he's I guess William Pitt back in. It's historical. It's like it's semi-historically accurate. So they were trying to strike Pitt. The Prince Regent's funds off of the civil list.
Right.
And basically that's the money that the government has set aside for the monarchy. So they're trying to get him off the civil list, and Blackadder, realizing that, all of his high living, even as the butler, kind of is dependent. Right. So he sets up what's called a by-election, which is like a random election in the countryside,
right,
to have someone elected as a member of parliament. And so he just, he rigs it all. Basically he wanted his stooge, Baldric, who's like his dog's body, his servant, who is also an idiot. He's basically surrounded by idiots at all times. So he's always being thwarted by just being around stupid people.
Do you think that reflects our current election?
So ultimately, yes, it does.
Okay.
It definitely is like the people that you choose to represent you or to serve your own purpose. You can see it like in the crappy Trump campaign where he's surrounded by right-wing nut jobs and people that are yelling.
Celebrities who he thinks will.
Quick tangent. Like over the last few weeks, they've had like Hillary's had like this huge support from Barack Obama and Michelle Obama and all these other like people that are out there giving these huge speeches, and he's got like nothing. He has like these loud, yelling, angry men and his cleanup crew that goes out Sunday mornings and just has to deal with the things he says. But basically, back to the 1800s. Yeah. So the election turns out, and it's a town of like a few hundred people, and the overwhelming vote was for the Adder Party of 16,472, and then the other side gets like 100 votes. And it's just like you can see like the machinations and his trying to, and each time he tries to dig deeper into the scandal and dig deeper into trying to get his man elected, and eventually moved from member of parliament to the House of Lords. They fuck it up even more. But it's delightful. I'll let you borrow the DVD set and never get it back again.
I'll get it back eventually. Richard, what's your second?
I'll tell you what. You give me the DVD set, and I'll give you the Battle of the Network Stars that I still haven't given back to Jeff.
Okay. We'll just pass them around.
You give my couple of copies, my Batman DVDs to Jeff.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
We got it all worked out.
And then somehow I get an extra cat out of this.
What the heck?
So my second one is the election between Matt Santos and Arthur Vinnick in the last season of The West Wing. Which
This is good. This covers a lot of ground. You kind of forget that elections last
happened
a
in
year.
and that it actually happened in the world of The West Wing, because the only election you really see is the second election of Bartlett, which was mainly more about his whole MS thing. You didn't really see the nuts and bolts of the election as much. And to be honest, I did not see any of this when it first came out, because I had given up on The West Wing kind of by that point. And so I went back, and actually my father-in-law was watching all of The West Wing, and I wound up watching for the first time, I should say, the last season. And it was really good. You know, you have basically Bartlett's getting termed out. You've got all these Democrats trying to throw their hat in the ring, and kind of this dark horse comes in the form of Matt Santos, who is played by professional TV star Jimmy Smits.
Sure. An eventual president of space, Jimmy Smith.
Yes, that's true as well.
Star Wars is he space president?
Space Jimmy Smith, yeah.
Yeah, Space Jimmy Smits, who is, you know, this congressman from Texas that Josh Lyman kind of tabs as somebody who could go places. And he does not sure if he wants to run, winds up getting the nomination, and he's pinned against Arnold Vinnick, who is the liberal Republican senator from California, which doesn't exist.
I fucking love these guys.
Like that's the best they could come up with for contrast would be very liberal versus, you know, Republican who doesn't believe in restricting abortions. Yeah, that's basically their two opposing forces there.
I mean, we are talking about fictional elections here, so.
Well, it also seems like the world Aaron Sorkin wants to have. Versus,
Yeah, and it's very much this. Wouldn't it be a perfect world if even the Republican candidate wasn't like batshit crazy?
Yeah.
Who would it look like? Oh, it would look like Alan Alda. So that's who you end up having is lovable Alan Alda against, like I said, Jimmy Smits, who, I don't know, would he be on the Mount Rushmore of TV actors? Guys who are basically just do TV. Like your Don Johnsons.
Yeah.
Or your...
Do you think that there has to be, like, I think to be on the Mount Rushmore of TV actors like that, I think that you needed to make an attempt at movies and then kind of slink back to, like, CSI Miami. Like,
yeah.
Like David Caruso.
Like David Caruso.
Yeah. You totally have to fail in features to make it on TV.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's not true in Los Angeles, but I know regional theater, you have to fail on TV to make it on regional theater, because it's always Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, starring Murphy Brown, you know,
starring Gary Burghoff.
It totally is.
No, the best thing about this was at one point for the last debate, they wound up actually doing a live debate between the two characters, and it was
like live on NBC.
It wasn't taped or anything. It was just done live, and they had all their talking points and everything, but they actually just kind of went back and forth.
Oh, wow.
They did one for the East Coast and did one for the West Coast. And it was, sometimes it's kind of tedious to watch, but it was also really fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
And again, it was that sort of Aaron Sorkin, like, masturbatory dream of what a election should look like.
Yeah.
And of course, Santos won. Santos was always going to win. There was some debate because John Spencer won.
Blues Explosion?
What's that?
John Spencer.
Yeah,
Blues.
not the Blues Explosion. No.
Of course he's gonna win.
Yeah, I mean, you mean the poor man's Jack White?
Yeah,
that guy. No,
the Costco Eric Clapton.
John Spencer, who had
passed away.
Yeah, passed away in the right before the end of the season. He was supposed to be the vice president candidate. So there's a rumor going around that Vinnick was supposed to win, but they decided not to because it's like, well, hell, you can't have Santos's vice president die right before the election and then have him lose.
Yeah.
Turns out that wasn't quite the case, although Vinnick was such a compelling character that there were writers arguing right up to the last episode they were writing of the election that no, Vinnick should be the one that won.
His polling was really good.
Yeah, exactly. He did bigly in the writer's room.
Bigly. So we are at the halfway point here in our election season show, and we are really excited that a listener has provided the subject this time around, and we would love to hear the topics that you would love to hear us debate on the Mount Rushmore podcast. You can do that by going onto Facebook, following us on Twitter, going even to the Instagram page where we post things and lending your voice to the conversation. Let your vote be heard, folks. No wasted votes. Nothing's going to cancel out your vote. If you want to vote a lot, you can go to iTunes and vote by downloading each one of our past episodes, and you can really let your electoral college know who
let your electoral college freak
flag fly by rating and reviewing the episodes. So we'd love that.
Now remember, if you're from California, your vote's going to be weighted different. Your rating's going to be rated differently than if you're in Nebraska. Your vote, your rating may count more.
Or the outlying U.S. Virgin Islands.
We really got to work on tipping the swing states here, guys, with our ratings.
That's true. Okay, so we're back from the awkward midpoint where I say all that stuff, and we're back to Michael's third.
My third is the 2004 Preston High School presidential election between Summer Wheatley and Pedro Sanchez from the film Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, wow.
Never seen it.
Really?
Shut the front door. Really?
I've seen pieces of it.
You've seen the shirts, though, right?
Oh, yeah, I saw the shirts. I saw people doing really bad Napoleon Dynamite impersonations.
I saw Napoleon Dynamite in a Halloween costume just recently. Come on, really? Come on.
Well, to bring Richard up to speed...
I know what it is. You don't have to explain. I'm not like an idiot, guys.
I don't know.
You're not like an idiot?
No, I'm not like an idiot. I am, yeah. There's no simile or metaphor here, or whatever you maniacs call it.
For someone who isn't as...
versed
in the fine details of the story, rich, white, and popular Summer Wheatley, played by
what's wrong with all that?
Yeah, I got one of those three.
one of the Duff girls, Haley Duff, is up against newcomer to town, Pedro Sanchez, out of Juarez, Mexico, and he could not be any more unpopular.
Yeah,
I mean, his best friend is Napoleon Dynamite, who probably is the least popular of all people.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's a nerd.
Pedro's almost a non-person.
Especially in the eyes of all the people in the school.
Yeah.
And so he kind of fleetingly decides to run for president of the school just out of nowhere. And, runs his campaign with Pedro, this Vote for Pedro campaign. And Summer is, almost like what's her name, an election, is seemingly a lock to win it.
Yeah.
And her slogan is, with me, it'll be summer all year long, and it's silly. It's dumb. But at the end of the movie, they each have to go up and give a speech, and she gives her speech, and Pedro's standing in the wings waiting to give his, and like the principal or someone comes by and says, "Well, I hope your skit is going to be good." And Pedro and Napoleon turn to each other and like, "Skit?" And he's like, "Yeah, after the you give your speech, you have to have a skit." And so, like, immediately he's crestfallen.
Yeah.
And Napoleon springs into action and out of nowhere busts out this ridiculous dance to a Jamiroquai song. I remember when I watched it, there was maybe been like 3 movies that I've seen where I was just like gut-bustingly on the floor, like laughing, like couldn't stop at the theater. One was this dance scene from Napoleon Dynamite. 2, one of the Austin Powers movies where he's fighting Mini-Me and he's like picking him up and throwing him around like a rag doll.
This is the man who's insulting me about my not watching Napoleon Dynamite. This is this comedy taste of the man.
And the third one is there's a scene in Bruno where he's like having sex with his tiny like Asian boyfriend.
A slingshot or something.
Yeah. Those 3 scenes I've never gotten like just
uncontrollable.
Uncontrollable. Thank you. So of course, Napoleon's dance wins the day, and I think I just liked it because it was it's an underdog story, but then also was solved not through politics or not. It was just solved through just the love of dance and especially like the crowd and the high school gyms reaction to it. It was like that perfect moment where like he finished his dance and then there was a beat.
He runs
and
awkwardly off stage.
And then everyone erupts and it's just everyone's Pedro wins.
I'm convinced that journey of that character from Napoleon Dynamite's story, I think, is so relatable because it seems like a journey towards personal authenticity. And here's a guy who's surrounded by his brother who's meeting babes online and kind of pretending to be somebody he isn't, and his uncle who's literally wants to devise a time machine so he can go back to this person he believes he was in high school, who could have been a contender as a quarterback.
I like I said, I haven't seen the whole movie, but I believe, is that the uncle who can throw a football over a mountain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uncle Rico.
He also threw a football quarter mile back in '82.
Yeah. And I think what happens in that dance scene is this very exposed, very awkward display of personal authenticity. Here's a guy who has also been lying to himself about being cool or being somebody who could even help Pedro, because he can't really.
Yeah.
And then ultimately he goes on stage and doesn't put this plastic facade up there. He bears his soul in this most awkward, ugly dance. You can't imagine it.
It's so ridiculous.
Closes his eyes, sways to the music, and I think that's just what's so fabulous about it. He becomes completely vulnerable, and I don't know. He's no longer prioritizing tater tots. He's prioritizing his friend Pedro.
And look what it did for John Heater's career.
Oh, it's
Sad.
yeah. That's interesting. Efren Ramirez,
Yeah.
and John Heater each have an identical twin brother.
Does Efren Ramirez have one too?
Yeah, identical twin.
That is
They
wild.
both have an identical twin. I think that's crazy.
Our mutual friend Scott, who will be joining us in a few weeks for an upcoming episode, has a story about going to the Ralph's in North Hollywood late one night and hearing two guys just kind of across the aisle, "You idiot, we don't need to get milk." "Yeah, we do." And thinking it's just two like losers doing a bad
Yeah.
Napoleon Dynamite, and turning the corner and it's John Heater and his twin brother,
twin brother.
talking exactly like Napoleon Dynamite in real life.
Crazy.
That's great.
Okay, your third, Richard, is what?
My third is Leslie Knope running for city council.
Oh, wow.
On the fourth season of Parks and Recreation. And I love it because it's just such a silly. I mean, part of it is because they have created, they wound up creating this incredible world sort of around Pawnee with all these like secondary characters who might only get a couple of scenes, but then, a few episodes, 2 years later, they'll
Right.
come back. And it's just this incredibly well thought out kind of ecosystem that they made. And this one in particular, I mean, Leslie, honestly, I tried to watch the first season. I was excited about it. Watched the first couple episodes and was like, this is not for me.
It's amazing how many comedies start out that way, where the first season is such a turnoff, and then whatever, like as long as they're given enough rope to come back for a second season, they kind of figure it out and turn it around.
Yeah.
Like Cheers. I mean, Cheers, one of the best comedies of all time.
First season's not so hot.
It's kind of like there must have not been a whole lot on, and like the ratings were terrible for that too.
And actually, Parks and Rec, which I found this out as I, years later, went back and just rewatched everything. I guess it was the first half of the first season. It came off like basically she was like a female Michael Scott.
Yeah.
And they had like a break, and they kind of sat down and realized, wait, this character's not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So they kind of returned her almost into like a Tracy Flick, but like more likable. Just this like super like with it, organized, idealistic. This is the way everything is supposed to go, and if I just do everything right, this is going to turn out okay. And she is just constantly thwarted by the idiocy of everyone around her, and then her own inability to basically understand how to play it, how to be in the real world, and actually deal with things not going, I think, exactly the way that she thinks they should.
Yeah, she's definitely won't bend or break or go into like the gray area, morals wise.
Right.
And a lot of politics is about kind of dabbling in that gray area a little bit.
Right. So she decides, she had been working in the Parks and Recreation Department, wants to become a politician, decides to run for city council for Pawnee. And her opponent is Bobby Newport, played by Paul Rudd. And right there, it's Paul Rudd. You're in good shape.
Yeah.
So his character is basically the son of the richest man in Pawnee who owns like, what is the plant that they?
It's a candy factory.
Candy factory. Thank you.
And they give away a lot of candy, and everyone loves him because of all the candy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's basically the candy man running for office, even though he doesn't really want to run for office.
Yeah.
And it's just all these absurd things that kind of happen. Like they wind up doing a debate where she keeps getting flustered. I mean, the debate's sponsored by Sweetums, the candy company.
Yeah.
And you've got heavy hitters like Perd Halpley asking the questions, who is like the local news airhead.
Yeah.
and there's also a former porn star who is running. So it's got like elements of that like weird like California, the Gray Davis.
The Mary Carey.
Yeah, the Gray Davis recall election and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's interesting because it's so reflexive of this election. Like everything seems to come. Like maybe it's every 4 years, all of this stuff kind of gets churned up from the bottom. And, you know, a rich son of a millionaire is facing a very competent woman. And
right. Yeah, I mean, it's...
And the bar is set so... Like in that debate,
so
the bar is
him.
set so low for him.
Right.
That he's just like... He gives the dumbest... stupidest dumbass answer and like he's like he doesn't care, he doesn't really want to do it, and then everyone kind of treats like anything he says is brilliant, and she's giving policy answers and just like, all right, back to this guy.
And at the end of the debate, Bobby Newport reveals that if he doesn't win the election, his dad's going to move the candy company to Mexico, I believe it was. And so that kind of leads to the big, like, swelling music moment of Leslie kind of ditching her planned, closing remarks to say basically, you can't hold this town hostage, and kind of this big, like, speech, which winds up being enough to get the election close enough that it becomes into a recount. Which, again, now it starts debate. Now it starts to be the 2000 election all over again. And it's just, there's just so many little goofy... I mean, basically, Bobby Newport's doesn't want to win. He actually tells people to vote for Leslie Knope at one point. Is just literally happy when he doesn't win because he doesn't have to do this stupid thing. In spite of everything, the most competent person wound up winning against an idiot who didn't actually want to be, but it wound up being a margin of like 20 votes or whatever, which is just like, this is politics, everybody.
I think that's a funny light that is shown on the role of leadership, whether it's presidential or others, is that it's often the worst job you could ever have.
Oh, yeah, and then she gets recalled the next year.
Yeah.
Did she?
Yeah. Oh. Next season, she wound up getting recalled.
Okay, Michael, wind it up here.
My last pick is the 2008 presidential election between Republican Andrew Boone, played by Kelsey Grammer, Democrat Donald Greenleaf, played by Dennis Hopper, and the single vote that will determine the outcome in the election.
This can't be a good movie.
In the movie,
I know what the movie is. This is not a good movie.
It's not a very good movie. It really speaks to the importance of people actually going out and voting.
Is Kevin Costner a baseball player in this?
He's not. He plays a character named Bud, and he's kind of like a just loser type guy. He's a single dad with a daughter.
So there's no baseball or sports involved?
No,
I'm out.
Baseball.
Kevin Costner, no.
I feel like Kevin Costner scripts are all going to Matthew McConaughey now. Like he aged out of him, and McConaughey aged into Kevin Costner.
Maybe.
I think so. So what did you like about it?
Well, he plays a character who's just kind of like, he's tuned out from the world. He doesn't really have any opinions. He's kind of just, he's not a drifter, but that's like his mentality.
Yeah.
He just kind of gets along in life. And his daughter is exactly the opposite, as I'm sure all of our kids are going to grow up to be the opposite of whatever we are.
Right.
And so she, registers him to vote, and he doesn't care. He doesn't follow the issues. He doesn't know who's even running for president. And of course, by movie magic, she sneaks in and casts a vote for him. But the voting machine was unplugged, so the vote registered but didn't count. And everything comes down to, I guess, like the Electoral College is tied. And of course, somehow they can track that this was the one vote. It's a movie, so who cares?
Yeah.
Basically, it's revealed that he is the lone person whose vote counts. And so for like 10 days, they decide to they ultimately decide that he's going to vote again, and he has 10 days. And it's basically, the movie is about these two campaigns going back and forth, trying to woo his vote on things that he doesn't actually care about or have a stance on, but they kind of keep constantly misinterpreting the things that he says.
Right.
And like the Republican starts saying that he's pro-abortion, and the liberal guy changes his. Like they keep switching opinions just to woo this one vote. It becomes as much about like the campaign managers being both sleazy and underhanded. But at the end of the movie, And it's it's got good people in it. It's got Stanley Tucci and it's got Nathan Lane, and it's filled with good actors. It's not just a great movie.
Is Stanley Tucci a foppish advisor or foppish character who guides somebody somehow? He's always definitely the kind of
he's more underhanded.
Okay, all right.
But ultimately, it comes down to there's a final debate that they're going to have at the end between the two candidates, and Bud's the one that's fielded questions from the people, and he just gives this really emotional, kind of empathic, self-reflexive speech that hopefully Richard will put a link up. But it's a great moment. It's just kind of him talking to the people about how he hasn't done his job and he hasn't paid attention and he's kind of drifted through life and he's kind of put everything off and not really been a good person and good American. And it's this weird kind of pathos and you kind of wish everyone in America would kind of have just a moment of looking at themselves in the mirror. And you don't really need to watch the rest of the movie, but watch that last 5 minutes. And the best thing is you don't know who wins. He casts his vote, and the movie ends with that kind of ultimately it doesn't matter which one of these two campaigns wins. It was more about the voter himself.
Yeah.
So he voted for a third party. He voted for Jill Stein. That's what you're saying.
All right.
That's great.
So, Richard Manfredi.
Okay, I am pulling an audible here from what I thought I was going to do.
Oh, what? Okay, this is
I'm
unheard of.
I'm seeing the defense. I see a blitz is coming. And I gotta get out of this. I gotta get out of this play. I'm gonna get killed. I was gonna go with Bulworth.
This is some weak chiseling on your on your part.
I was gonna go with Bulworth.
Okay.
Just because that's something that everybody, whenever a candidate starts going off the rails,
they
always say, "Oh, he's having a Bulworth moment." Remember somebody like you said speak naked truth.
Okay.
Oh, he's having a Bulworth moment. But it's a terrible movie. It's a really bad, racist-y kind of movie, and it's probably something that felt he's rapping with a beanie on. It felt like something that probably 60-year-old Warren Beatty thought was speaking truth to the power, but really just is ugh. So I can't do it. So instead, I am going with the Election Night Special sketch from Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Oh, that was mine. Okay.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, then I win.
Okay.
So this is also known as the Silly Names sketch, and basically it's parodying this coverage of elections in the United Kingdom. And it's funny because Monty Python is not a terribly political show, which is one of the reasons I think why it holds up so well. There's just not a lot of political commentary or things that are of that particular moment. And even this, which is kind of a spoof of elections, it's really more about the election coverage and how overheated and insanely silly that it is.
Python was for a kid in Kansas City who had never been to Europe, and I didn't watch the BBC that much, and I didn't really read that much about politics and understand that they had a caste system, all that stuff. It was an insight into the structure of British politics and things like that were very unusual, and all the party systems and things like that. And it was so funny.
Yeah, this was really sort of my same way. Growing up in Kingsburg, California. This was sort of my first introduction into the British election system, which now that I know a little bit more about it, I realize just how incredible this is. So partially it's, you've got the commentators, you've got they'll announce an election result and they'll go to one of the analysts and say, well, what do you think about that result? Well, it's exactly as I predicted it would be, except the wrong person won. And I think that's largely because of the amount of votes that were cast. And you've got somebody over there, I think it's Graham Chapman, with a thing, it's like the swing-o-meter or something, showing the swing votes, and it's just like a big arrow kind of arm thing. And he's never giving, well, there's been a big swing, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. And
there was one loss, gain, and pathetic defeat was it
right.
went to.
So it's partially that, and then which is like this really smart sort of spoof on the media at the time. But then it's also partially just an excuse for, I would assume, John Cleese to just start rolling out the silliest names humanly possible. Because you have the sensible party, and the main secondary party is the silly party.
Yeah.
And then you'll occasionally have the third party, either the somewhat silly party or the very silly party.
Yeah.
So
in the the Blackadder episode, there was something similar because they had like the Adder party, they had the wig, and they had the standing at the back, dressed stupidly and looking stupid party.
Right.
And I think there was probably definitely a nod to that episode.
Yeah, so you've got sensible party candidates like in Leicester, Arthur J. Smith, who loses a close race to the silly party candidate, Jethro Q. Bunwacket Buzzard Stubble and Boot Walrus Titty.
That was something Python did such an amazing job as, like Rocky and Bullwinkle did, as being funny for adults and kids. You know, if you didn't know British politics or even really what politics was, you could laugh at Walrus Titty.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's no way that having the last one, which is like this 20-second list of like silly names and ringing bells and train impersonations gets 2 votes. But it's incredible. It's just, for me, it's that perfect kind of Monty Python mix of really highbrow, smart humor, and also that incredible lowbrow. And I think we talked about that in the Comedy Snobs episode.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like this, you know, the silliest, stupidest thing you can imagine, but then also this really smart stuff on top of it. So,
Thank you so much for listening. I, as the judge, now have the dubious honor of getting to decide who wins this election of the person who wins this Mount Rushmore podcast. And I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to decide who wins. I'm going to let Jennifer Skornik decide by examining her picks and one of my picks. So Jennifer Skornik, I think, really liked Richard Manfredi for a while because Jennifer Skornik, she picked the runner-up as the runner-up Leslie Knope's election for City Council and Parks and Rec. Jeff Hopkins, the judge, he picked the election night Monty Python sketch. So, I mean, it would seem like he voted for Richard. Jennifer Skornik also picked Election as one of her choices. And she picked Welcome to Mooseport.
oh, really? The Gene Hackman's final
Gene
movie?
Hackman's Farewell and Ray Romano's Farewell, too.
I hope so.
Ray Romano's spanking that he went back to television, too. But you know what? She also picked Bulworth. So
How many did she choose?
she chose runner-up is Leslie Knope. Douche and Turd episode of South Park was her fourth choice. So in that she and I agreed with some, but then disagreed with some of Richard's choices. Jennifer and I are going to pick Michael Winfield, and I think it's really because he went all the way towards examining elections in which a candidate did a good job or a better job than some of the Richard's choices of being the idealistic person that we would like to see or actually examine topics that we'd actually like to examine during an election. So there was a very votable streak in Michael's choices. King and Kodos, of course, examined the idea of what the two-party system was, how maybe these two people seem fundamentally different, but they're both corporate shills anyway. Come on. And why wouldn't we vote for a third party, even if it was Ross Perot? And then the funny idea of what would it be like to have Rowan Atkinson as a politician in Blackadder. There was the Pedro campaign from Napoleon Dynamite, and then the swing vote thing. So Michael's the winner.
I know. I refuse to accept.
Okay, let's put on Hail to the Thief right now.
I refuse to accept the.
Richard's trying
I believe that this was
Mr.
close
Trump,
enough.
you have to
close
accept.
enough that it triggered a recount.
I believe that
Richard,
Richard
that Michael has some hanging chads.
Richard
he really should take care of.
Richard seems to be claiming that this election is rigged, or this vote was rigged.
Oh my
this entire
God.
time. The media, the podcast world.
China is behind this.
Oh my God, I'm so thankful to be just about done with this election.
You know what? This is such a great podcast. I think it could go on 4 more years. 4 more years.
No.
This has been the Mount Rushmore 2016 election edition of its episode. As always, I've been Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.